Have you ever noticed that in 1937, two film cameras were introduced that feature the same little film rod, but each of those performed completely different roles? Not all film rods are created equal, and Rolleiflex proved that in 1937. 1937 was the year of the film rod. Rolleiflex made it smart, whereas Zeiss, they kept it simple. Now, the two twin lens reflex cameras that I am referring to for this particular video from 1937 are, which ones are they? They're the Rolleiflex Automat, 1937, and the Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2, also in 1937. Now, for the purposes of this video, I don't have a Rolleiflex Automat, but I do have two Rolleiflex cameras that feature that same film feeler mechanism. So I'll be using one of those as an example to compare to my Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2. So let me show you what I mean. We've got my Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2, which I'll be using as an example. And for today's example, because I prefer how it winds along and stuff like that, I won't be using my Rolleiflex 2.8D, which is this one over here. I'll be using my Tele Rolleiflex. It's a little bigger, it's bulkier, but as I mentioned, I prefer the winding mechanism and it'll make this demo a lot easier. So here's the Rolleiflex, Tele Rolleiflex, that we'll be using for our examples. So in a previous video that I made, I think it was last week or the week before, I briefly touched on the film rod mechanisms of the Rolleiflex, and then I also mentioned that the Zeiss Ikon, this particular one, the IKOFLEX 2, manufactured in 1937, also has a film rod, but it functions in a completely different way. And I'm going to show you those in today's video, how they're completely different. So in that previous video, I mentioned that this was made in 1937, and I wasn't quite sure when this automatic type of film rod sensor was introduced in Rolleiflex, but it turns out that they were both introduced in 1937. But do keep in mind that this camera is not from 1937, but the mechanism that you see in this camera was introduced in 1937. So let's talk you through the mechanisms of these film feelers and listen closely, because the way that they count your film couldn't be more different. For those of you that have watched the Rolleiflex video, I'm going to start off with the Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2. If you want a full-on video that discusses the camera and example photos and stuff like that, the film is being developed or will be developed soon, and I'll be putting that video out very soon. Without any further ado, let's check out the film feeler in the Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2. You open the back over here, and here is the famous, or infamous, however you want to say it, film feeler over here. Shall I turn on a light quickly? Now you will note that compared to the Rolleiflex, the Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2 still has a window, even though it features a film counter. But even though I would say that the technology of this film counter or this film feeler is somewhat inferior to that of the Rolleiflex, I still think it's pretty genius, and I was impressed when I encountered it for the first time. It's part of what makes this camera a pleasure to shoot, in addition to its excellent glass that it has at the taking lens. Shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some dummy film. And how this differs to that of the Rolleiflex is this is a roller that counts your film at the top here, and I'll show you that in a little bit. You'll see a counter at the top here, but it's not based on the thickness of the film, so there isn't an automatic element to it. But as this rolls along, as the film passes it, as you're advancing it, as it rolls along, each amount of rolls that you do here will move the mechanism at the top that'll show you at which frame you're at. So I'm going to roll this, and you're going to look at this counter over here. I hope you can see it. Even if it's blurred, it's going to move. It's like a shine that you can't really see. There we go. Can you see it? It's moving. And then I'm going to let it go. There we go. So I'm going to move this take-up spool to the take-up chamber, and then we're going to put some dummy film, and I'm going to show you what I mean. And while I'm respooling that dummy film, I invite you to check out my channel and subscribe if this is the type of stuff that you enjoy watching. My channel has a bunch of videos, some of which explore photography, lenses, cameras, artistic intention behind photography and stuff like that. I do invite you to check that out if that's the type of stuff that you enjoy watching. I don't really hype things up and stuff like that. It's mostly just my honest advice and opinions and stuff. If you're interested in checking out some of my photography coffee and potentially helping out the channel, I have a buy me a coffee where you can buy some zines, which I've made at a pretty affordable rate, because I figured, seeing as they're digital, I can make them affordable or really affordable because they're digital. So once they're done, I don't really need to do too much more work. So feel free to support me there and check out some of my past work, some of my past projects. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of the video. So note how with this one, even though you've got a film feeler or a film rod, in the Rolleiflex, you need to put this underneath. And also the Rolleiflex one is much thinner than this one. For the Zeiss Ikon IKOFLEX 2, all you need to do is load your film as per usual. There's no need to put it underneath. I'm going to do that quickly. So the film has taken, as you can see over there. As we're rolling it, you'll see the counter already moving. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close it up and show you why you still need the window. Open the window. Let's do it this way over here. See, as I'm advancing the film, we're already counting film. So I'm going to talk you through this because my eyes are really not that great. I'm not sure you'll be able to see it because the glare and stuff like that, but I've wound it on or advanced it all the way. We've got that arrow, then the next arrow, and then you've got the dot, 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 and then you've got yourself to frame number 1. That is what you use this red window for. From here on out, you can close the window, but because we've got a roller in here that has rolled as we're advancing the film, and because it's more of a semi-automatic system more than it is an automatic system, we now are roughly at position number 7 or 8 in your film. That's a number 7. I'm usually at around 7 or 8 by the time I'm done with this part over here. Now remember, you no longer need to use the window, but what you do need to do is you need to reset this counter so that it reflects number 1 because you're on your first frame. So you do that with this little button over here, which you depress that way, but I'm going to do it off camera so that you can see what happens to the film counter. I hope you can see it. Can you see it? Probably focusing on my face, that's the problem. I'm going to hit it now in 3, 2, 1. That should say number 1, and you probably heard that little click. Yep. Number 1. And now what will happen is you can take your first exposure, and when you're done, you can advance the film, but there's no hard stop. You have to look at the film counter. You have to advance it. My eyes are pretty bad, so I can't see for at number 2, but I think we are at number 2. A little bit more. And now we are at frame number 2. Now I'm going to advance this on all the way to frame number 12, 7, and there we are at frame 12, after which it all goes pretty straightforward. You can now advance this all the way until essentially you're hearing the film flapping in the take-up spool. And you're done. And listen to this sound when I open this door. I'm going to open it now. I'm going to put this next to the not the microwave, next to the microphone so that you can hear the sound of the film rod resetting. Goes zoom because it rolls all the way back because it's on a spring of sorts. Listen. Exposed film counter back at number 1, and you heard that sound. And to just briefly talk you through the Rolleiflex mechanism, I'm going to redo that. I'll do it as quick as possible so to not take up too much of your time, but I just need to redo this dummy film. All right, we've got our dummy spool, or we've got our dummy film in the spool chamber, and here is the take-up chamber over here. And with the Rolleiflex, this is the film rod that we're referring to. Completely different size, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, a completely different mechanism. And it is this completely different mechanism that turns this into an automatic system. And it does so based on reading the pressure difference between your backing paper that doesn't have film right now versus the thickness of this backing paper when it will eventually have film attached to it. Because as you roll on, you'll introduce film in, making that paper thicker, and that's when it reads it with the sensor over here, and that is what's going to get the whole mechanism activated. So with your Rolleiflexes, always remember, or at least with your Rolleiflexes from 1937, particularly from the Rolleiflex Automat onwards, you need to feed your film underneath this rod. That is very important. Let me just get it into the take-up spool. So we've got the film in the take-up spool now, and it has taken. And one thing that usually happens with twin lens reflex cameras that take medium format film, which I think they mostly all do, is that when you're advancing this on, you'll usually find an arrow that shows up on your film, an arrow that is supposed to align with a marker in your camera. But you don't need that with your Rolleiflex because it's all automatic and based on the pressure that you read with this rod over here. And if you don't put your film underneath here, you're going to advance the film all the way through, and it'll completely go all the way through without having stopped at all. And then you've got essentially a wasted roll of film. So do be careful. I'm going to close this up. We don't need that arrow because it's all automatic, remember? I'm going to close it up like that. Closed, closed, and locked. And I'll bring your attention to these numbers over here, which is currently at 0. Now we're advancing, and pay attention to how this moves. Did you hear that? The pressure sensor sensed that the thickness of the paper changed. And you see that 0 over there? It's moved ever so slightly. There we go. First frame. So now we're at the first frame, and this is where the whole thing is pretty cool and it's all automatic. To rest this crank over here, take it back. That cocks your shutter and it rests in there, and now your shutter is cocked on your first frame, ready to shoot. And if you're not yet ready to shoot, you can lock your shutter so that you don't hit it by accident. And it is recommended that if you're going to crank the shutter and it's cocked, you don't really want to change the shutter speed to 1/500th of a second. You can change the other shutter speeds, but it's recommended that you do not change it once you're at 1/500th. So you have to do a little bit of thinking, and that information might be incorrect. So I do apologize if it is, but locked, let's unlock it. Frame number 2, cocked. And there we have it. 2 film cameras, 2 film rod mechanisms, but only one changed twin lens reflex film photography forever. And I guess that's the short story of 1937's film rods in twin lens reflex cameras. And I'd like to ask you, which would you rather roll? Let me know in the comments. That's it for today, folks. Thanks so much. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.